Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Meeting Needs Using Encore Talent webinar. My name is Hershey Basuego, and I'm a member of the Nonprofit Effectiveness team at the Boston Foundation. We're pleased to be hosting Encore Boston Network, ReServist, and ESC of New England to lead this important conversation about leveraging Encore talent. I'll be serving as your moderator today, so I want to start off by sharing some ground rules. First, please be sure to mute your phones or audio lines, as we will be using the chat box exclusively for Q&A to minimize audio issues and interference. Also, this webinar will be recorded, so if for some reason you lose your connection, don't worry. We plan to follow up with all registrants with a copy of the slides as well as a link to the recording. Here's our agenda for today. We'll start off with some contextual remarks from my colleague, Stephanie, then move on to our series of speakers listed here. Each speaker will present for about 10 minutes, followed by a 5-minute period of Q&A specific to the content that speaker presented. If there are more questions posed than the speaker can answer in the allotted time, we'll make note of all of the unanswered questions and move them to the open discussion period at the end, where we'll have roughly 20 minutes for general questions and open discussion. Any questions that we're ultimately unable to answer during our time together will be responded to after the webinar and included in the materials that we will be sending to all registrants. So with that, I'm happy to hand it off to my colleague, Stephanie Guidry, Program Officer for Nonprofit Effectiveness at the Boston Foundation.
Hi, everyone. As Hershey just mentioned, my name is Stephanie Guidry, and I work at the Boston Foundation on our Nonprofit Effectiveness team. And I'd like to thank you again for attending today's webinar. On behalf of our team at the Foundation and the partners who are the driving force for today's webinar, Encore Boston Network, ReServist, and ESC of New England, thank you for attending. This webinar will help you to do a number of things. The first, it will share with you the latest information about engaging older adults as a talent solution. The next, it will share knowledge on tools and resources drawn from the Encore Boston Network sources. It will build your awareness of the staffing pathways available to you through Encore Boston Network, ReServist, and ESC of New England, each of which you'll hear from today. And then last, it will increase your understanding of the next steps on how these organizations can help you. Before we jump into the content of the webinar today, I wanted to share why this work is so important to the Boston Foundation. The Boston Foundation is Greater Boston's community foundation, and the goal of our nonprofit effectiveness team here at the Foundation is to support and strengthen individual nonprofits and the nonprofit sector as a whole. We do this through a focus on 3 things, which you can see in front of you on the screen. The first is capacity. So we work with organizations to build their operational capacity, to deliver on organizations' missions, to collaborate, and to drive social change. The second is resources. So we promote and facilitate strategic data-driven philanthropy to drive resources to nonprofits via the Giving Common, an open online database with more than 1,000 nonprofit profiles. And last, and really the driver for our participation on today's call, is leadership. Nonprofit leaders are the primary drivers of change in the organizations and the communities that they serve. And we seek to develop, recognize, and connect the sector's leaders, as well as build a diverse nonprofit leadership pipeline. So this last point is really one of the reasons that the Foundation is so excited to support the work of Encore Boston Network and its efforts alongside its partners here in Greater Boston, like ReServist and ESC of New England. What we hear from nonprofits and know from research, which you'll hear more about in a moment, is that capacity continues to persist as a key challenge facing nonprofits, especially given tight budgets, funding constraints, and a rapidly changing political environment. We believe that engaging adults 50+ at nonprofits is a smart and promising, yet largely under-tapped way to help the sector build diverse, multi-generational talent pipelines. Tackling our region's biggest challenges and best opportunities will take all of us, and it will take healthy, effective nonprofits. And what better way to ensure nonprofits are prepared for the times ahead than to invest in its people who are needed to move this work forward. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome you again and hand it over to Doug Dixon of Encore Boston Network to kick off today's program.
Thank you, Stephanie, and good afternoon, everyone. Anyone, if you could go to the next slide. Anyone looking at the nonprofit sector, and certainly those of us who are in the thick of it, will immediately get the meaning of this image. Don't mistake this for a hug. It's more like a vice that keeps getting tighter. Stephanie mentioned capacity, resources, and leadership as keys, and the challenges in all of those are contributing to this squeeze. Today, we want to focus in particular on workforce challenges. Next slide, please. As we know, most nonprofits are small. Half have 5 employees or less. 80% have 25 or fewer. And most don't have formal succession plans. That number is actually over 70% for nonprofits in the Boston area, according to a report just released by the Boston Foundation and Third Sector New England. So it's clear that most nonprofits have very little bench strength, which gives them little room for managing change, and in some cases, just keeping up. Next slide, please. And those challenges occur in other ways as the job market continues to tighten with the improving economy. Voluntary turnover averaged almost 20% in 2016. The hardest jobs to retain are in direct service, followed by program management, finance, and fundraising, all essential roles. And bringing qualified people into nonprofits is constrained by budget limits. Another factor is finding the right skills at any price. Next slide. Partly because of size and limited capacity, most nonprofits are functioning without some of the tools in place that could help to navigate this challenging environment, like a formal recruitment strategy or a retention strategy. This makes the challenge doubly difficult, and given the constraints on time, the prospect for change doesn't look encouraging. Next slide. So that's one trend, an ever-tightening squeeze in the nonprofit sector. There's another trend that we are all hearing about, the 10,000 boomers reaching retirement age every day, creating a rapidly growing pool of talent. Ironically, this talent is at risk of sitting on the sidelines, going to waste, just at the time when nonprofits are facing steep human capital challenges. Next slide. So we have these two huge important trends, and the question is, what if we could find a way to connect these two trends to create a solution for both nonprofits and the 50+ population? Next slide. Stated another way, what if we could design a human capital strategy that made available a range of specialized skills that are affordable, flexible, and offered some unexpected bonus points? Let's talk about each of these in turn. Next slide. First, let's look at skills. But let's look at what the skills produce in terms of results, not just what the skills are that are employed in gaining the skills, gaining the results, I'm sorry. In a recent survey of nonprofit leaders who had worked with adults 50+ in Encore roles, some of which we'll talk about in a few minutes, 91% said they brought skills to the organization that weren't otherwise available. 79% said the work had a direct impact on their mission. 73% said that they brought new ideas, tools, and approaches to the organization from other work experience. 66% helped the organization grow and build scale. 52% helped the organization gain higher visibility with funders. 49% helped lower costs or improve service, or both. And 39% had a direct role in introducing new programs that otherwise would not have come online. Next slide. These skills come in all flavors and shapes, and you'll see most of these variations and recognize them as reflecting the composition of today's workforce, with maybe a few extra twists. 2 points I'd like to make. First, adults 50 plus are surprisingly affordable, partly because of the special arrangements that we'll talk about shortly. And they're surprisingly flexible, able to fit into a variety of contexts to help you solve a variety of workforce challenges. And again, we'll come back to some of those in a few minutes. Next slide. And now for the bonus round. Here are some things that you might not expect would come as a result of new people coming into the organization. Adults 50 plus bring knowledge and skills from previous experience and other sectors that can provide direct and immediate benefit to organizations. They also possess a lifetime of connections, many of which can be helpful to you in your work. Every study of engagement and loyalty that I've seen shows that older adults score higher than other age cohorts. Adults 50 plus are good problem solvers. They have a lot of experience dealing with complex situations. They add a layer to multi-generational workforce, adding depth, diversity, and the opportunity for learning, including mentoring and coaching in both directions. And finally, the experience of many older adults enables them to step into key roles with little or no training and create immediate impact. Next slide. Here's what Encore talent looks like. About 44% are under age 55. Another 44% are between 55 and 64. And about 12% are over 65. About 38% have a college or graduate degree. About 18% have a high school education, and the rest have some college or a certificate or a license or some other credential. Next slide. There are a lot of isms that we talk about generally, but that have specific meaning in the context of employment. And ageism is one of growing importance because it's still lurking in the shadows, and partly because the stereotypes that it shields are so far from the truth. So let's take a minute to bust a few of those myths that hang in there with the persistence. First, learning is not harder for older adults. It's different in some ways, but not harder. Brain changes as we age actually can enable complex learning and thinking that younger folks may find more challenging. So it's the absence of learning that diminishes brain function, not actually age. Another myth is that mixing generations leads to friction in the workplace, and often just the opposite of that is true. Here's one of my favorites. One doesn't need to be a digital native to know how to use technology. And if someone hasn't been exposed, it doesn't mean they can't learn and won't learn. It's just a question that they don't yet haven't had the opportunity. Older adults will not only accept smaller roles, sometimes that's exactly what they want at this stage of their lives. This is a time in life when priorities often shift, and that being in the top job or having huge responsibility isn't always high on the list at this stage. For many, it's more important to be doing something that makes a difference, and to be doing it with people that they like and are like-minded, and to be able to fit other things into their day. Another huge misunderstanding is that older workers are too expensive. For paid staff, salary and benefit costs need to be measured against productivity. And even when raw costs appear higher, real costs are at a par or lower because older adults are very often more highly productive. For the kinds of roles that we'll be discussing today, costs are much lower, in fact, because of the special arrangements that we'll describe. And of course, volunteers return many times the investment than other staff. Finally, there's a perception that adults 50 plus won't stick around. And we talked a moment ago about loyalty, and all the data shows that if the fit is a good one, older adult tenure is measured in multiple years, not in months. So now, with that overview, we'll take a moment for a few questions and then turn our attention to three options that could provide solutions to your human capital needs.
Thanks so much, Doug. Really appreciate that opening. Again, for folks on the line, please feel free to put your questions in the chat box, and then we'll organize it here and ask the relevant speaker your question. So, Doug, I don't know if there's a common question that you hear in terms of working with Encore talent. I think you've provided a great overview in terms of busting the myths, especially. I'm curious if you see, in terms of the affordable, flexible options, paid, stipend, volunteer, and pro bono, if there is more concentration in one of those areas versus another, or if one of those options is more popular than another.
I think the most common use of older adults in the nonprofit workforce today is as volunteers. And I think that's partly because nonprofits haven't fully understood nor taken advantage of some of the opportunities that we'll talk about today as part of this webinar. That's not to say that a lot of older adults aren't interested in volunteering, but volunteering does have some limits, and I think it's important for most organizations to look broadly at a range of solutions, because there are some things that volunteers can't do very well for an organization, and sometimes you need a different kind of relationship to be able to bring the talent on board that can produce the kind of long-term and sustainable results that most organizations are seeking.
And does Encore have resources in terms of structuring these other options that are not the traditional volunteer opportunity?
Well, there are a number of options available, and we'll talk about some of them today. But I would say that for anyone who is interested in exploring what some of those options are, in addition to what you may be hearing about today, reach out to us, and we'd be happy to make introductions based on solutions that we know about, options that we're aware of, that might fit the circumstances that that's just, that your organization is facing.
That's great. Thank you. So because we don't have any other questions right now, I think we'll move along to our next speaker. I'm happy to introduce Julie Cockford, Executive Director of ESC of New England, which connects Encore talent from the for-profit management world to the nonprofit management world. Julie?
Thank you, Hiroshi, and thank you, Doug. I'll jump right in to build on Doug's presentation. ESC does connect people from the corporate sector to the nonprofit sector, but also from the nonprofit and government sector to the nonprofit sector. Our expertise is drawn from all areas of the workforce. As this slide shows, the Massachusetts nonprofit sector is huge. If I had asked you to guess the number, I bet no one on this call would have guessed that in Massachusetts alone, there are 33,943 nonprofits, according to data from July 2013. I would submit to you that that number is larger today without question. But the basic story remains. More than 75% of the nonprofits in the Commonwealth are the 501c3 charitable organizations, and 1 in 6 members of the state's workforce is employed at a nonprofit. That's a significant economy driver. We also know that when the economy takes a downturn, as it did in 2007 to 2009, the nonprofit sector actually responds by adding services and adding staff. ESC of New England provides a whole suite of solutions tailored to the unique needs of nonprofits. First, we're a nonprofit ourselves. We were founded 35 years ago to provide expertise to help nonprofits succeed. Many times our first engagement with a sister nonprofit is through consulting, helping an organization create a strategic plan on which the staff, the board, and other stakeholders come together to agree. Our consultants are known for going the extra mile to ensure the plan has buy-in and will be implemented. Consultants come to us, as I mentioned before, from across the corporate and nonprofit and government sectors. They provide their services to ESC pro bono, and our small staff manages and matches those consultants with projects that nonprofits propose to us. ESC Consulting could help your organization review your management and staffing plan and assess what is needed to increase service and monitor progress. Implementation of a new strategic plan or a new human resources plan could require additional staff, like the fellowship positions I'll describe in a moment. To fill a specific staffing gap, an ESC Encore Fellow might just be ideal. Encore.org, Second Acts for the Greater Good, launched the Encore Fellowships program in 2009. Through the end of 2016, 1,500 fellows have been matched with nonprofits in 42 metro areas and over 20 states nationwide. The largest growth was just last year when over 650 matches were made. Fellows are highly skilled, seasoned professionals, and many with advanced degrees. And since many nonprofits are resource challenged and lack the funds to hire for a position that would ultimately help the organization grow, Encore Fellowships does provide a resource for matching skilled, seasoned professionals with social purpose organizations in high-impact paid transitional assignments at below market rates. These are some of the Encore Fellows that are working across the country. The Bureau of Labor Statistics projects that by 2022, that's just 8 years from now, about 31% of people ages 65 to 74 will be in the labor force. That's almost double the 16% that were working in 1992. I want to introduce you next to some Encore Fellows working here in Massachusetts. People with deep experience who've chosen to work for a stipend on transitional assignments doing mission-driven work, typically full-time for 6 months or half-time for 12 months. The fellowship costs the nonprofit roughly $25,000. Their stories will help us understand the impact they are making already and the potential impact a fellow could make at your nonprofit. First, let's meet Rory, who served as the Finance and Operations Director of Soccer Without Borders. With 35 years' experience in financial management, risk management, and operations, Rory applied his experience designing policies and procedures in tandem with his expertise in non-standard problem solving. The overarching goal of Rory's fellowship was to use his financial expertise to help Soccer Without Borders through an important stage of transition from young, fast-growing startup to a mature, sustainable nonprofit organization. Next, meet Carol, an engineering manager with a proven ability to deliver to requirements, quality, and schedules for both technical projects and non-technical workplace initiatives. In her assignment as a Capital Campaign Project Fellow, Carol is increasing capacity building at the YWCA of Central Massachusetts by providing project management and operational support for the internal project team responsible for facilitation of major fundraising, marketing, and facility activities related to the current capital campaign. Next, let's hear Michael's story. His fellowship is at Crotched Mountain Foundation, where he's an information technology specialist in education. After 40 years in the high-tech world as a software technical writer, Michael was looking for the opportunity to finally apply his communication and business educational background to help humanity. The goal for his fellowship is to develop a training manual based on his documentation of the workflow of new assisted and educational technology software and hardware to allow children with multiple physical and cognitive disabilities to access their unique curriculum. Anne is an Encore Fellow at Playworks, managing the new Generation to Generation program partnership there. Anne has been an administrator, higher education faculty member, consultant teacher who has been deeply engaged with the improvement of teaching and learning throughout her career. She has served in multiple school improvement roles. Anne will learn about volunteer programming and the Team Up model, creating and implementing a framework to support successful development of a volunteer recruitment program at the Team Up schools sponsored by Playworks, Massachusetts. Victor was selected by Pathways for Change to serve as a volunteer engagement coordinator. Victor has management experience at a large technology firm where he was the technical lead on numerous projects. In his fellowship assignment, Victor will expand development of diverse volunteer recruitment strategies and processes, create more efficient internal systems that support a successful volunteer program, and increase volunteer engagement through social media platforms. Fellows are working with all types of nonprofit organizations. Should your organization be on this list? A survey of matched seasoned professionals with social purpose organizations doing high-impact paid transitional assignments shows the tremendous positive impact of Encore Fellows. Over 97% of nonprofits and fellows give positive overall satisfaction ratings. Over 80% of nonprofits expect sustained positive impact as a result of the fellowship year. At the end of the fellowship, 80% of nonprofits are likely to hire Encore talent again from the private sector. Since Encore Fellowships was piloted 8 years ago in California, Encore Fellowships have provided experienced talent to complete high-impact projects through 1.5 million hours of service valued at roughly $150 million. For nonprofit leaders with an immediate initiative or position that requires an experienced professional, ESC Encore Fellowships is a talent matching resource that can help you propel critical initiatives forward. ESC Encore Fellowships provide experienced talent with the right skill sets through a very rigorous, criteria-based, and selective matching process. I hope this brief overview of ESC's services to our sister nonprofits has been helpful. Donna Morell is the director of our Encore Fellowships program. Yulia Yako is director of our consulting program. We're all at this address and email address, and you can follow us on Twitter and Facebook. and we very much look forward to hearing from you. Our website is also here, escne.org. Now, I look forward to any questions you might have.
Great, thank you, Julie. There are a number of questions that have come in, but again, if you do have any questions, please feel free to type them into the chat box, and we'll get to them as soon as possible. So first, one of the first questions we have is around what percentage of ESC consultants are over age 55?
About 50% are over age 55, maybe 60%.
Great. And what percentage of Encore talent earn market rate?
I guess that would depend on the job, wouldn't it? When I say below market, I'm really talking in many cases about the experience that the people bring to the table. So you wouldn't expect someone with a 40-year or 30-year track record of business expertise in management to be earning $25,000 for a half-time job. It may be that in the organization, $25,000 for a half-time job is standard, but typically they would not be able to hire someone, I think, with the experience and management skills and operations background that our fellows typically bring.
Great. One question I had was, how ESC sources your fellows?
That's a terrific question. Both consultants and fellows come to us by referral through our website, through social media. Many are self-referred. Some are referred by former employers. There have been employer-sponsored fellowships where a corporation that has a need to transition employees out of their workforce has in fact funded the stipends for transitioning employees. So that has been a source for perhaps 2/3 of the fellows that have been placed throughout the country. Here in New England, about half of our fellows have been fully funded by the nonprofit doing the hiring, and about half through the third-party corporate sponsor. We're looking to build more corporate sponsorships as well. So if there's anybody on this call who'd like to investigate how a corporate employer could become a sponsor of a fellowships program for transitioning employees, please contact me.
Great, thanks for that. We have another question that came in around the cost of a fellowship, what it costs a nonprofit, or is it completely pro bono?
So a fellowship is not pro bono. The fellowship, well, if it's corporate sponsored, it's pro bono. And if it is not corporate sponsored, and I don't think I have any slots right now that I can say I could offer today that with corporate sponsorship, although I had 15 over the last year. If the nonprofit is paying, the total cost is $25,000 plus employer taxes on the stipend, which is $20,000. So the person that you would hire through our matching process, you would do the interviewing the way you would hire for any employee. We give you a set of nominees who we think are good matches from the description that you work up with our help of the job description. And then we would run that through our 100 candidates or so and provide you with the best matches. You would interview, choose, and if you chose someone, you would pay them the stipend. If it was full-time for half a year or half-time for a full year, the stipend would be $20,000 plus employee taxes, and $5,000 to ESC for managing the process, for the recruitment management and cohort management. We actually keep the fellows together and provide continuous learning opportunities for them.
That's great. We have 2 more questions, but please keep your questions coming. Whatever we don't get to in this 5-minute period, we'll leave to the general discussion period at the end. If you have a question for a particular speaker, please note that as well. So the next question is, if you have folks over 65 and they've retired, would a nonprofit need to pay them traditional benefits?
The stipended fellows typically, I don't know of anyone that's paying benefits, because a typical nonprofit isn't paying benefits on a part-time employee, and I would say even someone you hire for 6 months, if you're hiring them on a contract for 6 months, that's not usually eligible. They can be not 1099. They should be put on payroll. I think those instances where you might need to consider benefits, we can talk to you individually about that. I'd be happy to think about what the actual role is. I should also add that we are quite flexible about the program, so if what you really need, let's say you're an organization with 10, 12, 13 employees, and the executive director and the finance person have been doing all HR, and it's just time to introduce a more professional outside help with HR. But maybe you don't need someone half-time. Maybe you'd like someone quarter-time, 10 hours a week. We could arrange that too. It'd be on the same prorated scale. So basically $20 an hour and the additional $5 for the management.
Perfect. So final question for this segment at least. What percentage of fellows go on to being hired by the nonprofits for either full-time or part-time roles? Even ballpark if you don't have the number right at the top of your head.
I don't think I can answer that accurately, but it is something I think I can look up. Because the program is relatively new, as I said, launched in 2009 and with exceptional growth last year, I think we're going to be able to have much better staffs over the next couple of years with regard to that. I know here among the 25 masters or so that we've made, many of which are current, so they haven't even finished their fellowships, I know of 2 that have been already retained by the organizations to stay on.
Great. So thanks, Julie. We really appreciate that overview. Next, we're going to hand it off to Dan Singleton, who's Business Development Manager for Reservists New England, which connects Encore talent with staffing opportunities across the region. Dan?
Great, thanks so much. Reserve is a national nonprofit that matches highly skilled and highly talented professionals, 55 plus, with nonprofits and the public sector. Reserve basically is an innovative talent matching service. Reserve fills critical staffing gaps, allowing organizations to achieve their goals and objectives. Tapping into Reserve means that you're getting a lifetime or a career's worth of experience. What this means is that reservists do not need to be trained, but hit the ground running, typically in a job, with the only requirement being a basic orientation. Using a reservist, which is what we call folks in reserve who go out and do the job, means that you're benefiting every party involved. So everybody benefits. That's the nonprofit or the government agency, the clientele or the constituencies, the community, as well as the reservist too, who's taking advantage of using their skills and making a difference in the community. There are 4 primary areas of social impact for the National Reserve model. Most of our focus is on the first one, and that's capacity building. I'm going to give you an example of a real dedicated program in the Boston area. It's actually in a neighboring community called Chelsea that touches on 3 of these social impact areas. So we received a grant for Chelsea to work with the parents of 8th grade students in the middle school. The idea is to work to use reservists, and we have 3 reservists, former school administrators and teachers, who are working throughout the year with these parents to create college-going cultures in their homes. It's been a powerful model, and And so obviously we're touching upon education because involved in this model is a very strong partnership between the middle school and the high school. And ultimately, the model is about creating social justice and a level playing field for children of immigrants, children of color, so that they have the tools and the access to higher education, post-secondary education for a better life. Now a little bit about ReServist. Like Julie said, our folks come from all sectors, from business, from government, and from the nonprofit world. And we've got teachers and lawyers and architects and social workers and nurses and consultants, and you name it, pretty much we have it. What motivates ReServist? First of all, and the research backs this up, they're motivated by mission. That's really important to them. They're also motivated by impact. What are the results? What impact is it having on individuals, on communities? And the last one would be they're motivated by flexibility. They see the job as community service, and they want to give back, which is why they're willing to work for a stipend, and I'll get to that a little bit later. Reservists typically work 15 to 20 hours per week. And I'm going to give you one illustration of a reservist and the impact that this individual had. I'll try and be quick here. So a program in the Boston area called St. Mary's Women and Children's Center is a homeless shelter that provides adult basic education and job training. They got some money to do a strategic plan. The number one recommendation was that there be an IT director. They kind of laughed and said, we've never had one. It's not in the budget. What do we do now? They heard of Reserve. They signed up. They posted a job. And sure enough, we had someone who was a CIO. His name is Greg. He basically was taken with their mission, really felt that they were doing good work there, but there were lots of needs at St. Mary's at the time. He worked 5 days a week and drove every day from Maynard, Mass. To Jonesville and Dorchester, which is quite a trek, I might add, for 18 months, and created what I would call real systems change. This is a good illustration of the use of capacity building and expertise when they come together in a nonprofit setting. The profile of a reservist, I'm not going to spend time on this. It basically is consistent with what Doug Dixon characterized earlier in his presentation. So no big changes there. In terms of skills in demand, there are many. And I'll start with the two that we would like to clone. If we could clone fundraisers and grant writers, boy, we'd be really popular out there in all of New England. We just cannot get enough of them. But as you can see, there's a great list here, but there are many more, like event planners, curriculum writers. More and more we're getting into direct service, as I'd be training, teaching, coaching, mentoring. There are many, many needs out there. How Reservists Help? Really, once again, it's about enhancing capacity building and providing workforce expertise. Reservists want to contribute by sharing their knowledge and experience, and they're very much able to help younger employees grow and develop without threat or without competition, because they're not in a situation where they're competing for someone's job. They just want to be connected on this job opportunity, and they want to be part of a team, and they need to be respected and valued for their contribution. Next is the stipend. The stipend is important because it validates the reservist's role and demonstrates the community partner's commitment. It's really about having some skin in the game. So we're, as one of the Encore options, our option includes a total fee of $18 an hour. We pay a stipend of $11 to the reservist. We have a third-party payroll that takes 24%, and the balance covers the administrative costs for Reserve to continuing their brokering role. The next slide gives you a sense of some of the broad range of partners that we've worked with. We've basically worked with more than 100 partners over the last few years. I would add Best Core, Operation Able, Brandeis University, the Metropolitan Area Planning Council, the Ecumenical Social Action Committee. There are many, many interesting organizations that we match people with. This is kind of a summary shot here. Our service model is pretty simple. We do take the risk out of hiring. We have a detailed database of talent. Currently, we have 350 reservists available to go out and contribute to society, to work in nonprofits or in government. We alleviate administrative costs. Because of the third-party payroll, we're reducing any administrative burden for the nonprofit. And that's basically what we do. In terms of getting started, it's pretty simple to register as a community partner. We ask that you go on www.reserving.org. You'll be asked to sign a partner agreement, and you'll get the ticket to basically post a job opportunity online. Feel free to contact us. We're more than happy to talk to you. Our director is Judy Willett. I'm the business developer. Our email addresses are there, and we'd be more than willing to speak to you and answer questions that you may think of later after this webinar.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Let's see. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to pop it into the chat. One question that we have is around, if you could explain more about the matching process.
Okay, yes, I actually did need to say a little bit more about that matching process. So we take advantage of technology, and so we're able to use technology to search for the right combination of skills and characteristics for a job. We also have a matchmaker on staff who follows up with the employer to clarify and really get a sense of the nuances of the job and of the organization. And then she would be following up with reaching out to reservists through technology, and then phone to talk about the job in person. We then our matchmaker would identify probably 3 to 5 resumes to share with the hiring organization. They get to choose how many they would like to interview. They set up the interview, and it's basically up to them to hire a reservist. I'm so glad that question came up because I meant to cover that. Thank you.
Great. Another question is in terms of the skills that you highlighted that were in demand. Obviously, grant writing and general fundraising is one. What would you say is the next level of demand that you see?
Well, it varies. It changes from time to time. Recently, it was with bookkeepers. All of a sudden, everybody was looking for a bookkeeper, and if we could have cloned them, that would have been the third one to clone. But I would say that in general, some finance services and some IT, those are pretty hot ones. And we have placed a lot of event planners as well, because everybody has events, and if you're in a small nonprofit and you're the executive director and you're already wearing 10 hats, sometimes it's the 11th hat that really pushes the ED over the edge. And here's where we send in an event planner who's done just that for 30 to 40 years and can take it over and have a great event.
That's wonderful. Okay, the next question is, has there ever been an issue of resentment in an organization because the reserve intern is taking the employment opportunity away from a younger professional entering the workforce?
I think that the answer to that would be no, because we're not about displacing full-time jobs. We're about filling gaps, whether it's a maternity leave, whether the finance director just came in and said, you know what, I'm not coming back on Monday morning, or it's a special project. So no, I don't think that is a concern or an issue.
Great. The next question we have is, are reserve jobs open-ended, or are the positions essentially permanent?
Most of them are not. Well, none of them are really permanent. I would say that and we do ask that at a minimum the job be 3 months in length. Now, have we ever cheated a little bit and let someone place someone for two months? Yes, we have. But the average is about 6 months. But I will say we have some reservists, again, who are working part-time and have been in the same organization for 2 to 3 years. So it's all of that. But the typical situation is 15 to 20 hours a week for about 6 months. That's what usually happens for a project.
Got it. The next question is if there's a reserve in the San Francisco Bay Area.
Yes, there is.
Great.
And you can contact, if you have trouble finding them, you should be able to just Google them, and it should come up, but feel free to contact me, and I'd be delighted to get you more information.
Great. So one final question is around the database of talent that you have. I think you mentioned that there are 350 reservists available, and I was curious if that was a total number or the number of reservists that are ready to go looking for opportunities.
Yeah, those are active reservists from what they tell us, and so certainly we don't place all the reservists clearly. That's why we're doing this. We're trying to let
here 350 in New England.
350 in the greater Boston area, basically, and it's we're trying to send them. We're relatively new in this area, and meaning it's been about 3.5 years. So this is why we're delighted to be part of this webinar today, because we're trying to get the message out to help nonprofits that are struggling, because this is a real resource that can make a difference, and we would love to place all 350 reservists in the queue.
Great. Definitely a lot of talent out there. So now I think we'll move it on along to our next presenter, Ramesh Advani, who's Executive Director of the Encore Boston Network, which offers network member organizations connections and ideas. Ramesh?
Thanks, Rishi. And thank you, everybody who's taking part in this. And a special thanks to 2 of our member organizations who are here. Both Julie and Dan have sort of whetted your appetite. And so what I thought, I'll continue this little, little tidbits from the chef so that you can get an idea of what are some of the things that you could be thinking of. And I don't know how many of you on our webinar today are member organizations, but if you're not, you can become a member very easily. You can see our website. The Encore Boston Network is a coalition of organizations as well as professionals who have spent their lives, and even today, they might be in government, they might be in academia. They are engaged with what we call Encore talent, adults 50 plus. So I want to just share and give you an idea on what Encore Boston can do for you. You've heard 2 of our members, like ESC and ReServ. They can help you find able, skilled, and experienced people for the work opportunities that provide positive social impact, which you're doing every day. We can also help you assess your staffing needs. We don't necessarily do that ourselves, but we have member organizations who can help you with that. One, for example, ESC can do, and there are others too. One of the things that we really believe is important, I just think it keeps not only older, but older and younger people more alert and healthy if you engage in learning events and participate and use some of the tools. And we are always happy to provide you with those, and we have learning meetings and webinars and in-person meetings. Most of our in-person meetings are held in metropolitan Boston, but even possibly outside. So let me just take a minute and tell you a little bit, again, to stimulate your thinking. One of the things that Encore nationally has developed is something that we call Encore Talent Works. And you can, I've put up the website, which of course when you send you the slides, you'll have it with you. This is a toolkit that you should be able to use actively. Now, I know how many of you like reading manuals or talking to people about things. What this is a very simple toolkit that helps you design roles that would be attractive to adults 50 plus. It also is a toolkit that helps you and your management team to recruit and retain adults 50 plus who might be very interested in your cause. Of course, you heard all the advantages of Encore Talent from Doug Dixon. Some of those are also covered here, as well as the myths about age that, if you have to convince somebody higher up in your organization about that, you can go through some of that. So Encore Talent Works is a tool you can use. You don't have to pay for it. It's all yours. It's available. And please feel free. And if you have questions about what you see, you can always write to me or write to us about it. So that's one thing I wanted to bring to your attention. Another one is a campaign that has been started nationally in 2016. It's got a very specific purpose. It's a multi-generational linking campaign to mobilize adults 50 plus with youth serving organizations. So I don't know how many of you who are participating today are involved with youth, but at the end of the day, we're all connected in our communities, and these days I would say even more so to focus on things that matter socially in your town, in your city, in your community. We call it generation to generation, and there are 4 communities around the country, Los Angeles, San Jose, Seattle, and Boston, and there are also national program partners who are part of this whole campaign. Let me take a couple of seconds and share with you one of the goals of the generation to generation for Encore Boston in our community. We feel this is, and by the way, thanks to the Boston Foundation, who's helped us make this happen in the Boston area. There are 4 major goals. We want to help organizations make quicker and more efficient links to Encore Talent. So this conversation we're having is exactly that kind of a thing. We want to help you prepare for, get the most, and then retain the Encore Talent. You might start off by saying, well, this is good, somebody's filling a gap, but longer term, you might say, it might be a really good arranged marriage. I don't know how many of you believe in arranged marriages. I know I do, and my parents did, but it really helps you get ready. We also want to help you. Encore Boston would like to help create a climate where the older adults become fully accepted in paid and volunteer roles. Knowing how to interact with younger folks, I think that's a challenge both for older adults and millennials, because there are gaps in terms of just socially connecting with each other. And our plan in Encore Boston is we're doing this with youth serving organizations, but we want to scale this up in other sectors. So not everybody who's an Encore Talent wants to work with youth. There are some who may want to work in the health care business, in elder care, in economic empowerment activities going on in inner cities with certain minority communities. So we have pretty broad, longer-term generation to generation goals, and which is why it's part of also the Boston Foundation's nonprofit sector cost effectiveness. So I just wanted to give you a sense of all of that, and you feel free to contact me anytime you want. I'm giving you also my cell phone number. I promise I do answer it. And that's my email address, and that's our website. So we look forward to talking more with you. And I also would like to just give everybody who's on the call a little bit of homework. So here's the homework. After we are done, I'm going to send out a survey asking you what you thought of what you've heard today, specifically on the topic of adding staffing capacity, but also, is this something that you would like us to do more of in terms of education on other topics, or more in-depth look at any particular area, like, you know, how do you address, how do you retain and engage older adults, or, you know, how do you do some of these things? So when I send you the survey, please do respond. You know, that's actually a measure of are we really making a dent in people participating with us? So whether you're a member or not, thank you so much, and we'll open it up for any questions you might have.
Great. Thanks, Ramesh. So again, please put your questions in the chat box. One from my colleague, Stephanie. The membership benefits sound great, but is there a cost for Encore Boston Network membership for individual nonprofits?
That's a great question, and there are details on our website, but basically we have two membership levels, a basic membership and a premier membership. People can join as individuals, because a lot of people are promoting the cause of Encore Talent, and also as organizations. And the basic difference between a basic membership and a premier is for an organization. A premier organization can bring guests free of charge, attend a lot of things free of charge, and have at least 3 employees come, not necessarily the named employee, but any time. So this is an annual, and it's not a burdensome membership fee. It's basically just cover our costs of the events that we have.
Great. In terms of learning events, how often do you have those? And is it virtual or in person, mix of both?
So it's a mix of both. We candidly, we haven't done too many virtual ones. This is actually the first one. We tended to do in-person meetings. And we actually have one coming up on May 11th, which I'd be happy to send out more information on that. The objective of that one is to feature and focus the members who attend, member organizations who attend, their mission, their goals, and what they're trying to accomplish. And also the keynote, the main speaker who will be running the meeting will be the Secretary of Elder Affairs, Alice Bonner. And Alice is very interested, and we feel it's important that not only that she gets exposed to our member organizations, but she will help you network, and we want you to network with other members. Our objective is to try to lower the bar and get people talking with each other.
Great. You know, I think you were able to pique a lot of our interest in terms of some of the common questions and tips that you have readily available, and obviously resources in terms of the actual toolkit. I wonder if you would be able to maybe answer one of those questions around designing roles that are attractive to adults 50+, if you have any tips for folks on this call.
That's actually a great question. So I can only give you, I'm sorry to say, but a superficial answer to that. It's more important that it be driven by the organization. So if the organization is sort of weighing certain, well, I would say short-term goals versus long-term goals. On a short-term basis, they could combine what I consider important tasks, which are part of the executive team as a project, so that there is meaningful, meaty work for the person coming in. So that's one way of doing it. The other way, if it's just purely voluntary and it's, to put it nicely, just routine work, there might be people who are just interested in administrative tasks and may be interested in doing it not just by themselves, but say 2 times or 3 times a week. They might be interested in going in. And to give you an example of this, actually, the Generation to Generation program, one of our program partners is the Department of Children and Families at the state. And what they have been understaffed for quite a while, And one of the challenges they have is their focus and mission is to get social workers focusing on the children as opposed to spending time in administrative work. For example, in the offices, they've got files that have got data that are needed for legal cases. The data has to be reviewed and redacted. So they came to us and said, we want to be part of this. So it is a youth serving organization, but the effort or task that they have is very much related for adults with administrative work. And we offered it to some communities, and we found that there are volunteers who say, you know, we'll be happy to go out once a week. You know, the 3 women in one community said, we'll make this as a trip. We'll go out and spend 2 days or 3 days, and we help them in the office with reviewing the materials and going through it. So it really is very much a case-by-case basis, so it depends. I think the biggest challenges people have in designing roles, many times it's not the actual role, but how do I get to where that nonprofit office is? Is there transportation? Do I have to spend so many hours? Or, you know, I really need to be back in time because I'm watching my grandchildren after school gets out, so I'll be able to do it. So, you know, there are many factors. I don't know if that helps.
No, I think it does. Thank you for that. I think if there aren't any more specific questions for Ramesh, we'll open it up for general Q&A and discussion. Again, if you have a question for a particular speaker, if you wouldn't mind putting the speaker's name along with your question, that would be great. But we'll start with some of the unanswered questions from earlier on in the webinar. So first, I'm not sure if we answered part of this earlier, but what percentage of Encore talent earn market rate?
Yes, I think the way I answered that before, this is Julie Crockford from ESC of New England. It depends on how you define market. So for someone who's got a 25 years of experience as a experienced manager and might have a master's degree and worked in an organization where they were one of the top 3 people, they probably wouldn't, market rate for that person for a management job would not be $25,000. And yet they are quite willing to work for the reasons that I think my colleague Dan at Reserve said so well. The people who come to us as fellows want to give back, and they want to work in social purpose organizations. And like one of the examples I gave of a technology fellow who said, this is something I've wanted to do all my life, is the opportunity to apply what I know to help humanity. And so he's thrilled to be at Quachig Mountain. So I think that's very typical. People are doing the work at what is below market for their skill set and their experience because they want the opportunity to give back.
Great. Julie, this is another question for you. What does ESC stand for?
So that's a great question. ESC started, believe it or not, in 1964. It was announced in the Rose Garden as a program that David Rockefeller started. The original ESC was international in scope, but again was volunteers, and they were taking entrepreneurism and capitalism abroad. So we had Peace Corps launched just before that to work with NGOs, non-governmental organizations, to improve the quality of life through the sorts of things that nonprofits, what we would call nonprofits, do. And then we had David Rockefeller and business folks volunteering their time to help spread capitalism. About 20 years later, Rockefeller and others started ESC in New York City, and because it was New York City, they called it National Executive Service Corps. So the ESC originally stood for Executive Service Corps. We no longer use that term. It feels dated to us and doesn't convey the empowerment that is really part of our model today. People still come to us as consultants for the same reasons. They want to give back to society, and as I mentioned before, our consultants volunteer their time. We work pro bono for ESC and we charge a flat fee based on a sliding scale of the organization's ability to pay for the consulting services that we do. And then for fellows, I've already outlined the payment schedule.
Okay. Great. So one of our attendees actually had an anecdote that they wanted to share, following up on, again, the ESC segment and the question about hiring following the completion of a fellowship. The participant shared that, or this is a direct quote, I continue to connect to the nonprofit where I was a fellow, now as a member of the alumni board. And before that, I was hired for 3 months to provide consultant services. So it's great that we have folks on the line who are active Encore talent themselves.
And I realized I can name 4 fellows that have been kept on board that I just know of in my head out of our pool of about 25 that have been placed here in the region, but there are probably others if I can come up with 4 in my head.
Yeah, that's great. This is a question for you, Dan. And I think actually you did mention this, but maybe this is more of a refresher for folks on the line. Could you mention again how much reservists get paid?
Reservists receive a stipend of $11 an hour.
Great. This is a question for any of you, all of you. Again, in terms of best practices, do you have any tips for organizations who have not engaged Encore talent before in terms of how to create an inclusive environment for both older adults as well as current employees? Or Doug, perhaps, maybe you can speak to that?
And yes, I'll start, and others can join in. I think the first thing to think about is, what are the principles of any workplace where you've got many layers of ages and individuals involved in the workplace. And I think respect for one another is a good place to start. I think understanding roles and what people bring to the organization in terms of their unique skills, their expertise, and as I mentioned early on, some of the bonus points that may not necessarily be highly visible at first, but one should begin to recognize with time. And I think integrating people on that basis in the workforce is in the workplace, I should say, is really the most important place to start. I think in addition, recognizing the needs of individuals, both for recognition, for training, for support, for supervision, all of those things sort of goes without saying, but sometimes we lose sight of those and take them for granted when we have a workforce that's been in place for a while and that perhaps is more one-dimensional in terms of age. So I think just paying more attention to those considerations as new layers and new cohorts, age cohorts are brought into the organization.
I think, this is Julie, that it contributes to learning in an organization, since studies show that diversity of races, sexes, and ages contributes to more ideas being generated and different ideas being generated. So that leads to better decision making because there's simply a broader mix of ideas brought to the table. Can't echo enough respect, and I think you'll find that people 50 and older have great respect for the digital, what feel like to us, the digital natives of millennials and their colleagues, let alone their children. And their, I would say, very fine ability to multitask They're used to listening to music and working on their computers and talking to someone all at the same time. And I think that is something that I think older people can do respect. And so just being aware of each other's differences and the way they do things and talking about them in the office. In any office culture, you want to create a culture where people can talk about their differences and what those differences contribute to making the workplace more effective.
I would add, this is Dan, if organizations want to kind of get out of the box and think about Encore candidates, which is about change and recognizing the changing demographics and the demands and the needs, then I think they also have to think about how they market, how they write job descriptions, and how they interview, and get out of those boxes too. Because if we know that older folks who are in Encore careers or considering Encore careers, if we know that they value mission and impact, that's one way to get that information out with job interviews. And if they also value flexibility, then job descriptions have to have language that demonstrates that those are core principles that would be okay, that they can abide by those.
Great. What about best practice around retention for Encore talent? Any tips that you'd like to share? And Doug, you too, if you have some thoughts.
Yes. Go ahead, Julie.
Jump in, Doug.
I was just going to say that retention is really a function of a couple of things. One is job clarity, making clear what the role is and making it possible for the person to be successful in the role. I think recognition is a key. There have been lots of studies that show the importance of recognition, particularly for people who are there part-time, who are perhaps volunteers or paid at below market rates. I think recognition can go a long way to indicating value and support within the organization. And I think the third factor that has been demonstrated to be important to retention is the extent to which people feel integrated into the organization. If they feel that they're an important part of the mission, and going back to the question of respect, that their ideas are taken into account, that they're included in the discussions that are central to the role that they play, I think people will feel as though they're a part of the organization. And if they feel a part of the organization and they're able to succeed in the role, they'll want to continue.
So our experience at ESC is much longer with consulting than it is with fellows. And what I'll tell you about ESC consultants is that they often stay involved with the organizations that they first went to as consultants. They go on boards, they go on advisory boards, they sometimes become, and obviously they become donors if they do that. They often find that some of the clients they work with are organizations that they want to be associated with for the remainder of their lives. Fellows we have less experience with because we've only been doing the program for about 3 years, but I've already begun to see a little bit of that with fellows as well, choosing to stay involved in either a paid or unpaid capacity because they just enjoyed the organization so much. I'll take a moment to just mention one other type of fellowship, because I think they're often, as both Dan and I have mentioned, for reservists and for fellowships, they're often implementation roles that by definition are transitional. So they're not necessarily designed where retention would be the right outcome. Retention of the person in perhaps a different role might be a good outcome. But for example, we placed someone with an organization here in Boston that's celebrating, the organization is celebrating its 50th anniversary year this year. This woman's role for the year is to design and implement anniversary activities for the whole year, including that major fundraising gala event. And at the end of the year, they won't be doing that sort of thing again. They're not an organization that does a gala every year, and the anniversary events were a series of all kinds of different things. So that's another way for you to think about how you can employ really high-level talent to do something very special and one-off.
Sure, that's great. Okay. One other question that came in is how to go about, or if you can, help an organization determine if an unmet staffing need can be best filled through one of the options presented today or another, whether it be Encore, ESC, or Reserve.
Well, the network isn't really doing the matching. I think Reservists and Encore Fellowships and ESC Consulting provide that. I think you can learn more from all of our websites and from calling us, emailing any of us. We'd be happy to answer.
I would agree with that.
And I think sometimes having conversations, exploratory conversations with more than one program, with the specifics of the need that you have in mind, can quite quickly reveal whether the fit is a good one or not. And if neither fits, then the question is what other options exist, and that's where Encore Boston Network can be helpful as well.
Great. There aren't any more questions that I can see popping in. So I'd like to take a moment. We have about 8 minutes left. Before we close this webinar out, I wanted to maybe go around and see if each panelist had, a parting thought or question or call to action that they'd like to make of folks on this call. Maybe starting with you, Doug, and then we'll here.
I think the parting comment that I would make is that this is what I would call a win-win, maybe a third win proposition. This is a solution that probably couldn't come at any other time in our history, and nor at a better time than this in our history. I think the first and most obvious factor is the demographic changes that are occurring in our society. People are living longer, so therefore the conventional notion of retirement no longer exists. People want to be involved. They are more healthy and better prepared, more educated, have a different kind of life experience than has typically been true in our history. And taking advantage of all of that is really what makes this win-win proposition such a special one, because organizations are in a position to take advantage of this windfall of talent just at the point at which it's most available. And of course, the third win is society generally. And what we didn't point out in the earlier discussion is that when older adults are actively engaged, when they feel a sense of purpose in their lives, when they're not sitting in front of their TVs, as many people do when they're not working. An interesting study was done recently that showed that older adults who are not otherwise engaged watch TV almost as much as they once worked when they're in their retirement years. So having people engaged in making a contribution contributes to better health as well as longevity, and of course that is good for society because now we're taking assets that would otherwise go to waste and putting them to good use, helping our communities, strengthening programs, and giving people important and useful work to do.
That's great, thank you. Julie, did you want to take a few moments?
Doug has summarized the situation very well. I think the talent pool is enormous. I am so impressed by the people who come to us. We are in the midst of what we call training, about 4 days of working with the people who have volunteered to join our consulting pool. There are 15 in this new class. Tomorrow is, or later this week, is our full day on nonprofit governance. The skills that people bring to the table always wow me. I can't say enough about how dedicated they are and how ready they are to learn how they can apply what they've learned in their careers, which have spanned several decades, and apply that to the mission-driven work that they want to do at this stage of their lives. They have the opportunity at this point to give back. They want to give back, and it just gives me great pleasure to be able to help match them with organizations, whether people are feeding the hungry or planting trees or working with young people, the scholars of today who will be the leaders of tomorrow. There are so many ways that consultants and fellows and reservists can make an impact. And we want to. They want to.
Great. Dan?
Well, I guess what came to my mind is that though most folks that come to register with Reserve are looking to work part-time and have a balanced life, I thought it worth mentioning that we do have people that end up finding a permanent job through Reserve. And one of those situations just happened, and it was someone with a long career in human resources who ended the career not on a good note and was feeling very insecure and lacked confidence. And what Reserve did was got them kind of back in the game. And although this individual would have said that she wasn't looking for, a full-time job or a permanent job, and sure enough, it really was a good fit, and everything just fell into place. And I was informed last week that she put out the job description and started setting up the interviews for the powers that be to interview. And in the end, they didn't like any of the candidates, and they asked her if she would take the job. And sure enough, she realized that she really wanted it. And it's just an important little piece that I thought I would add in there. It does happen, and this is not unusual, nor is it the norm, but it does happen.
That's great. Ramesh?
So the only thing I'll add, I think this has been wonderful. I say it's wonderful, that's because we're doing the talking and everybody else who's doing all the listening is not getting a chance to say, yeah, but. So, I'll just draw on my own cultural background and tell you that, matchmaking and networking has been the heart of the culture I grew up in, and I hope you will reach out if you think of things that are on your mind for the work you're doing or organizations that you want to interact with. Please feel free to reach out to us, and I'd be happy to talk to you and offer ideas and network solutions. And thanks.
Great. So thanks again to all of our speakers for taking the time to share their expertise and solutions with us. On behalf of PBS and our panel, thanks to all of you on the webinar for both your engagement and your questions. We sincerely hope that you found it informative and that you feel more knowledgeable about engaging older adults for your talent needs. Again, we'll be following up with all registrants with a copy of the slides, as well as a link to the recording, a written transcript of the Q&A portions, and other resources. But until then, please feel free to reach out to any one of us if you have further questions or just want to connect. And with that, just wishing everyone a wonderful day. Thanks again for your time.